Solomon's story begins not in triumph, but in the shadows of brokenness and redemption. He was the son of King David and Bathsheba, a union born out of scandal and sin. David, once the humble shepherd who became Israel's greatest king, made a grave mistake when he took Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah, and arranged for Uriah's death to cover up his wrongdoing. The consequences were severe. The child from that first union died, and David was left heartbroken, humbled, and repentant. Out of this sorrow, Psalm 51 was born, a raw cry for mercy that still echoes today as a powerful confession of human weakness and divine grace. But God, rich in mercy, did not let the story end there. From the same couple came a second child, Solomon. His birth was not just a new beginning for David and Bathsheba, but a symbol of God's ability to bring redemption out of deep failure. The Lord loved this child. Through the prophet Nathan, God gave Solomon a second name, Jedediah, which means beloved of the Lord. That name was more than a title. It was a declaration of divine favor and purpose. Solomon's very name derived from shalom, meaning peace, reflected the destiny marked out for him. Unlike his father, whose reign was defined by war and conflict, Solomon was chosen to usher in an era of peace, stability, and prosperity for Israel. He was the fulfillment of God's promise to David that his throne would be established forever through a son who would build a house for the Lord. For David, Solomon represented hope, a second chance, not only as a father, but as a servant of God's covenant. For Bathsheba, Solomon's birth brought restoration and honor, lifting her from a figure of shame to the esteemed mother of Israel's next king. And for the nation, Solomon was a prophetic sign, a child born from brokenness, yet marked by divine promise, destined to carry forward God's plan. His story began not with glory, but with grace, proof that God can write purpose into even the most painful chapters of our lives. From the ashes of sin and sorrow rose a king whose life would forever shape the destiny of a nation. Solomon's early years were marked by the kind of preparation that would lay the foundation for his future reign. Growing up in the royal palace, surrounded by the grandeur of King David's court, Solomon was steeped in both privilege and expectation. His father, David, was a man of immense strength and wisdom, yet he had also known the depths of failure. These experiences, both his triumphs and his mistakes, became the lessons Solomon would learn from as he began to take his place in the world. From an early age, Solomon was nurtured in the ways of the Lord. His father's psalms, filled with praise, repentance, and cries for mercy, served as the spiritual backdrop for Solomon's upbringing. David knew the weight of leadership, and he sought to pass on the wisdom he had gleaned from his own experiences. He taught Solomon about justice, humility, and the centrality of faith in all aspects of life. Even though Solomon had not yet come into his full inheritance, he was being prepared for a responsibility far beyond his years. The prophet Nathan, who had been a key figure in Solomon's life from the very beginning, continued to guide him. Nathan's influence was not limited to just prophesying the rise of Solomon to the throne, but he mentored him in matters of spiritual integrity and covenantal faithfulness. Solomon's faith was nurtured under Nathan's counsel, ensuring that he understood the sacred responsibilities of the throne and the importance of leading Israel with both wisdom and righteousness. However, life in the palace was not without its complexities. David's declining health stirred tensions within the royal family, particularly as the question of succession loomed. Solomon was not the oldest of David's sons, and as rival factions began to form within the palace, his claim to the throne was threatened. Adonijah, another of David's sons, sought to seize the throne, gathering key supporters from among Israel's military and priestly leaders. But Bathsheba, Solomon's mother, and Nathan intervened, reminding David of God's promise that Solomon would be his successor. This moment was crucial, as it cemented Solomon's place as the rightful heir. securing his future as the king of Israel. Despite the intrigue and the rivalry that marked these early years, Solomon's upbringing was a unique blend of divine favor and human preparation. He was not simply trained to be a ruler in the political sense, but to be a king who would serve God's purpose for Israel. Through his father's wisdom, Nathan's guidance, and his own natural curiosity, Solomon was being shaped into a leader who would one day lead Israel into an era of peace, wisdom, and prosperity. Solomon's ascension to the throne was a pivotal moment not just for him, but for the entire nation of Israel. The transition of power from his father, King David, was not without its challenges, particularly due to the political intrigue that marked the royal family in the final years of David's reign. As David's health waned, the question of succession became urgent. Solomon was not the eldest son, and his older brother, Adonijah, had taken it upon himself to declare himself king, gathering key figures from the army and the priesthood to support his cause. Yet, despite Adonijah's ambitious bid for the throne, Solomon's claim was divinely ordained, and his rise to power was secured through both human action and divine intervention. Bathsheba, Solomon's mother, and Nathan the prophet, who had been a constant presence in Solomon's life from the time of his birth, played key roles in ensuring Solomon's position. Together, they reminded David of the promise that God had made to him, that Solomon would succeed him as king and would be the one to build the temple for the Lord. David, though frail, responded decisively, ensuring that Solomon was anointed as king and declaring, "Long live King Solomon." This moment was not merely political, it was an affirmation of God's covenant and purpose for Solomon's life. Once Solomon was firmly established as king, one of his first acts was to demonstrate both wisdom and restraint, traits that would come to define his reign. His ability to exercise discernment became evident when he was faced with the rebellion of his older brother Adonijah. Instead of acting out of fear or anger, Solomon showed mercy, allowing Adonijah's life to be spared as long as he remained loyal. This act of clemency earned Solomon respect and set the tone for his rule, marked by justice tempered with compassion. Solomon's commitment to wisdom was highlighted by a pivotal moment early in his reign. As he prepared to step into the immense responsibility of ruling Israel, Solomon made an extraordinary offering at Gibeon, presenting 1,000 burnt offerings to God. This act of devotion set the stage for a life that would be guided by divine wisdom. In a dream that followed, God appeared to Solomon, offering him anything he desired. Instead of asking for wealth or long life, Solomon humbly requested wisdom, a discerning heart to govern the people of Israel. God, pleased by Solomon's selflessness, granted him not only unparalleled wisdom, but also wealth and honor, making him the greatest king of his time. Solomon's rise to the throne was not just the fulfillment of a divine promise. It was the beginning of a reign that would be defined by God's favor and the wisdom he sought to serve his people well. His story is a reminder that true greatness and leadership comes not from ambition or power, but from a heart aligned with God's will. Solomon's reign is often remembered for the immense prosperity, peace, and wisdom that characterized his leadership. One of his first and most significant achievements was the organizational restructuring of Israel, which set the nation on a path of stability and efficiency. Recognizing the need for order and a more streamlined administration, Solomon divided the kingdom into 12 districts. Each district was tasked with providing provisions for the royal court for 1 month of the year, a system that helped balance the resources across the nation and ensured a steady supply for the king's extensive needs. This thoughtful system not only promoted fairness, but also encouraged unity, as it distributed the responsibilities equitably across Israel's tribes, preventing any single group from being overburdened. Solomon's wisdom was evident in every detail of this plan, showcasing his ability to govern with both practicality and justice. Beyond his administrative brilliance, Solomon's greatest legacy is the construction of the temple in Jerusalem. This monumental project was not merely a physical structure, It was the fulfillment of God's promise to David, who had longed to build a house for the Lord. However, God had chosen Solomon to carry out this task, and he approached it with unmatched dedication. He understood the profound significance of the temple, not just as a grand building, but as a place where God's presence would dwell among his people. With this vision in mind, Solomon spared no expense in making the temple the most magnificent structure Israel had ever seen. To build this sacred place, Solomon secured a crucial alliance with Hiram, king of Tyre, who supplied him with the finest cedar wood from Lebanon. Solomon gathered thousands of workers, skilled craftsmen, and laborers to bring this divine vision to life. The temple was constructed with the utmost care and precision, using stones quarried to exact specifications, so that the sound of hammering would not disturb the holiness of the site. It took 7 years to complete, but the result was a masterpiece of architecture and artistry, a place that would become the heart of Israel's worship and a symbol of the nation's covenant with God. The temple's dedication was a moment of profound significance. When the Ark of the Covenant was brought into the Holy of Holies, God's presence descended in the form of a cloud, affirming that he had sanctified the building. Solomon's prayer of dedication was a beautiful reflection of his deep reverence for God and the recognition that the temple, though magnificent, could never truly contain God's greatness. This moment marked the pinnacle of Solomon's reign, a period of unparalleled glory for Israel, as the nation basked in the blessings of peace, prosperity, and divine favor. Through his leadership and the construction of the temple, Solomon not only established Israel's political and spiritual dominance, but also left a lasting legacy that would define the nation for generations. Solomon's reign marked the golden age of Israel, a period of unparalleled prosperity, peace, and international prestige. Under his leadership, the kingdom flourished in ways that would forever shape the course of its history. One of the defining aspects of this era was the immense wealth that Solomon amassed, not only through trade and resources, but also due to his extraordinary diplomatic acumen. Israel's economy thrived as Solomon established strong trade routes and alliances with neighboring kingdoms. His court became a center of culture and commerce, with goods flowing into the kingdom from distant lands. This prosperity was not merely a product of Solomon's brilliance, but also a testament to God's blessings upon Israel during this time. Solomon's diplomatic relationships with foreign nations further elevated Israel's standing on the world stage. One of the most notable alliances was his marriage to the daughter of Pharaoh, which helped to solidify peace and cooperation with Egypt, one of the most powerful kingdoms of the time. This strategic union, while politically advantageous, also highlighted Solomon's skill in balancing diplomacy with his faith in God's purpose for Israel. Additionally, Solomon established trade partnerships with other influential nations such as Tyre, Arabia, and Sheba. These alliances brought not only material wealth, gold, spices, and precious stones, but also opportunities for cultural exchange, enriching Israel in ways that went beyond mere financial gain. The international recognition Solomon received was extraordinary. His wisdom and wealth drew the attention of distant rulers, none more famous than the Queen of Sheba. Intrigued by the reports of Solomon's wisdom and the grandeur of his court, the queen made the long journey to Jerusalem to see for herself. When she arrived, she was overwhelmed by the splendor of the city, the wisdom Solomon demonstrated, and the flourishing of Israel under his leadership. She marveled at the magnificence of the temple and the royal palace, as well as the wisdom Solomon displayed in answering her riddles and questions. Her visit not only reaffirmed Solomon's reputation, but also demonstrated Israel's prominence among the nations. Through his political and diplomatic savvy, Solomon ensured that Israel was a dominant force in the ancient world. His reign was characterized by strategic alliances that promoted peace and prosperity, while his wisdom became a beacon to the nations. The fame of Solomon's court and his accomplishments spread far and wide, leaving an indelible mark on history. His golden age of Israel wasn't just a time of material wealth, but one of spiritual and cultural significance, as the nation stood as a testament to God's blessings. Solomon's leadership was a reminder that true greatness lies not only in wealth, but in wisdom, justice, and the ability to foster peace. Despite the early success and grandeur of Solomon's reign, his story took a tragic turn as the very blessings that defined his leadership began to unravel. Solomon's heart, once fully devoted to God, gradually drifted away, and the seeds of his downfall were sown in the very wealth and power that had brought him to prominence. His early years were marked by a deep devotion to God, with a singular focus on fulfilling the divine purpose for his reign. Yet as time passed, the very things that had once been a sign of Israel's success, the wealth, the influence, and the alliances with foreign nations, became the source of spiritual compromise. One of the first cracks in Solomon's faith appeared in his increasing reliance on material wealth and military power. Despite the warnings in the Torah, Solomon amassed staggering amounts of gold, and his kingdom became a symbol of opulence. His stables were filled with thousands of horses, and his military might grew alongside his material success. What had started as a wise strategy to secure peace and stability for Israel slowly evolved into a demonstration of dependence on earthly riches and military strength rather than on God. In his quest to build a strong, prosperous kingdom, Solomon began to stray from the covenantal faithfulness that had once defined his leadership. Solomon's spiritual decline was further compounded by his marriages to foreign women. In an effort to secure political alliances, he married numerous women from neighboring nations, including Moabites, Ammonites, and even the daughter of Pharaoh. While these marriages were politically strategic, they came at a great spiritual cost. Solomon's wives brought with them their foreign gods and religious practices, and Solomon, who had once built the magnificent temple of the Lord, began to allow the worship of idols within Israel. Altars to foreign deities like Ashtoreth and Moloch were erected, and the nation's commitment to Yahweh weakened as idolatry began to take root. The consequences of Solomon's disobedience were not immediate, but became increasingly apparent over time. God, in his faithfulness, confronted Solomon directly, warning him that the kingdom would suffer if he continued to follow these paths. In a third visit, God reminded Solomon of the conditional nature of the promises he had made to David's house. The kingdom's unity, peace, and prosperity were contingent on Solomon's obedience to God's commands. Yet Solomon's heart continued to drift, and the cracks in his faith were mirrored by growing discontent among the people. The heavy taxation, forced labor, and Solomon's lavish court created tension, particularly among the northern tribes. As Solomon's spiritual foundation weakened, so did the strength of his kingdom. His reign, which had begun with such promise, became a cautionary tale of the dangers of compromise. The wealth and power that once seemed like blessings turned into the very forces that led to his downfall, setting the stage for Israel's eventual division after his death. This narrative serves as a cautionary tale for us today. In a world where success is often measured by wealth, influence, and achievement, it's easy to become distracted by our accomplishments and lose sight of what truly matters. Like Solomon, we may start with pure intentions, seeking wisdom and guidance, but over time, the allure of power and success can lead us astray. The lessons of Solomon's life urge us to stay grounded in our faith, to seek wisdom not for personal gain but for the good of others, and to remain vigilant against the subtle dangers of complacency and pride. Ultimately, Solomon's life challenges us to examine our own hearts and priorities. Are we, like him, allowing our achievements to overshadow our relationship with God? The downfall of Israel under Solomon's reign reminds us that even the wisest among us can falter, and it is only through constant faith, humility, and obedience to God that we can avoid the pitfalls that Solomon so tragically fell into. His life encourages us to seek wisdom that leads to righteousness, not just success, and to build legacies that honor God rather than relying on fleeting earthly achievements. The story of Solomon is one of immense highs and devastating lows. A life marked by unparalleled wisdom and extraordinary achievements, but also by spiritual decline and the slow unraveling of a once thriving kingdom. Solomon's early reign was a golden era, marked by prosperity, peace, and a devotion to God that shaped Israel's future. Under his leadership, Israel flourished as a nation of wisdom and wealth, with the building of the magnificent temple being his crowning achievement. Yet, despite all these blessings, Solomon's later years were marred by decisions that would lead to the downfall of the nation he had built. The greatest tragedy of Solomon's life was not his fall from political power, but his spiritual compromise. In his pursuit of wealth, power, and peace through foreign alliances, Solomon allowed his heart to drift from the Lord. His marriages to foreign women, while politically strategic, led him to adopt idolatry, bringing foreign gods into the very kingdom that had once been devoted to Yahweh. The Lord, who had appeared to Solomon multiple times in his youth, offered repeated warnings about the consequences of turning away from him, but Solomon failed to heed these calls. His failure to remain faithful to God, compounded by the heavy burdens he placed on his people, eventually led to internal division and unrest that would fracture Israel after his death. Solomon's legacy is a complex one marked by wisdom and greatness, but also by the warning of what happens when we allow worldly success and compromise to overshadow our devotion to God. His life stands as a powerful reminder of the danger of complacency, of drifting away from the very principles that once guided us. Solomon's early humility, where he sought wisdom to serve his people, gradually gave way to pride and reliance on his own strength, a path that led to his spiritual downfall and, ultimately, the division of his kingdom.